Good morning, and after last week's enforced absence, I'm back, and I couldn't be happier. I'm still breathing, still alive, kicking and screaming. And as promised, today I'm going to make a short video about the lenses I use with my Fuji X-T2 and X-T20 cameras. I've been using this system solely now for the last 2 months or so, and yeah, I really like the lenses that I've got. As most of you know, I switched pretty well wholesale from Nikon to Fuji back in January, which meant I had to replace my Nikon lenses. I had a 16-35 f4, I had a 24-85 standard zoom, which, considering its price, was a lovely lens. I didn't have it for long until it fell in the water though. A 50mm f4 and a gloriously lovely 105mm f2.8 macro lens. The first lens I want to talk about though is my 10-24 wide angle zoom. Now this has taken the place obviously of my 16-35 f4 Nikon lens, and it's my most used, go-to, default, whatever you want to call it, lens. I'm primarily a landscape photographer, so having the wide angled is what I want most of the time. This lens is beautiful. It's incredibly sharp from 10-24 and from f4. It's superb. And one area where I think it beats the Nikon lens is in distortion. There is so little distortion even at 10mm with this lens. It's unbelievable really. Build quality of the lens is fantastic. The zoom and the focus rings are so smooth and positive to use. I know it's a subjective thing, the feel of those, but they do feel lovely to me. It's got an aperture ring, which I love about all the Fuji lenses that I've got. I like having that aperture control on the lens itself. Again, it's harking back to the old days of film photography. The lens does have one downside though, and that is that it's not weather sealed, unfortunately. Now I don't tend to go out in really bad weather, but sometimes you're shooting in damp weather. There might be a shower, or it might be snowing or whatever. So the weather sealing is a bit of or the lack of weather sealing is a little bit of a disadvantage with that lens. I am thinking of getting the 16mm f1.4, which is supposed to be Fuji's best lens, and that is weather sealed, so I may end up getting that as well as, or instead of, the 10-24 lens. It's got a 72mm filter thread on it, and I use the Lee slot-in filter system. Now I sometimes get some vignetting at 10, 11 and 12mm, but I think that's mostly my fault because I've left the polarizer ring screwed onto the Lee filter holder. I'm too lazy to take it on and off, and if I did take it on and off in the field, it's guaranteed that I'm going to lose those tiny little screws that come with it. And although Lightroom doesn't have a preset for dealing with distortion and vignetting for this lens, I have found that using the Nikon 10-24 preset does tend to get rid of any vignetting that is present, which is good. Yeah, I really love this lens. It's made some fantastic images already. Yeah, it's a great piece of kit. The next lens I want to talk about is the first Fuji lens that I bought, and I bought it when I got my X-T20 back in last October, and it's the lens that lives on the X-T20. It's a kit lens, but it's so much better than that. For a kit lens, it's got a really usable aperture range of f2.8 to 4. And the 4 doesn't kick in until you zoom out to 40mm, so it's a really usable fast aperture lens. Again, build quality is superb. The focus and zoom rings are lovely. Like my 10-24 lens, it's got optical image stabilization, but unlike my 10-24 lens, I tend to keep this on, as I don't tend to use this camera on a tripod. So I find the OIS really useful. I haven't worked out how many stops of anti-shake it gives me. I'm not into that sort of thing, but I have found that I can hand hold at about sometimes a quarter of a second and I'm getting sharp images, so it must be pretty good. It's probably 4 or 5 stops of help. The next lens is my 60mm f2.4 macro lens. Now this isn't a true macro lens, and in no way has it replaced my 105mm Nikkor macro lens. It's not a one-to-one, and I haven't as yet used it for any macro work, so I can't really comment on its macro capabilities. One thing I have noticed with the lens though, it is terribly slow to focus. I think it's one of Fuji's oldest lenses, but that's not really a huge bugbear for me. If I am going to be using it for macro, that's not a huge problem. And I have used the lens for a couple of landscape shots. I do like using short telephoto lenses for landscape work sometimes. It's handy to compress an image or to pick out some detail in a more intimate landscape, if you like. But the one problem with using this for landscape images is the tiny filter thread. It's a 39mm thread, and I haven't been able to find a step-up ring to take me from 13.9 to the 77mm Lee system that I use. If you know of one, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll gladly rush out and buy one. This lens though is built like a tank. It looks like it could probably withstand a drop off a cliff. It's even got a metal hood, lens hood with it, which is quite heavy, and it just feels quite satisfyingly chunky to use, despite its small size. It's got a numbered aperture ring, which is lovely. It's got half stops on that, and it's really clicky. It's very positive. When the summer comes and we get some life in the garden, I probably get it outside and try and take some close-ups of flowers or insects, and I'll test the macro capability. Now I do like macro photography, so if the lens isn't up to scratch, I might end up getting the newer 80mm Fuji lens, but we'll see how that goes. Next up is my Samyang. I know it's not a 35 or 50, it's a 12mm ultra wide angle lens, and I bought this primarily for astrophotography use, even though I haven't used it for that yet. I read and saw some of the reviews using this lens, particularly with the Fuji X mount system, and the results were superb. I like getting out and taking pictures of the Milky Way, so when the right time of year rocks around, i.e. late spring and summer, I'll be out there with this lens in some dark sky area, probably up the Brecon Beacons or down the Gower, taking nice images of the Milky Way or the stars. Again, even though this isn't a Fuji lens, it seems to be built really well, and it's a very attractive lens. It's a strange thing to say, but it's got a lovely sort of aluminium ring on it next to the mount, and it's got a lovely sort of clicky positive numbered aperture ring. It's a manual focus lens, but that doesn't really bother me if I'm going to be using it for astro or landscape use, because I'm usually manually focusing anyway then. So that's not really an issue. And if you are umming and ahhing about buying a Samyang or Rokinon 12mm f2 lens, don't hesitate. It really is a lovely piece of work and produces some great images on. Now the last two lenses I use aren't new lenses, they are rank old, probably about 40-year-old Canon FD mount lenses. I've got a 50mm f1.8 and a 135mm f3.5. Now I use them on my Fujifilm cameras with a best try or best koi or whatever it is mount. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Now, for some reason, the 135mm is much sharper than the 50. I don't know why, it just is. Probably something to do with the age of the lenses and the use that they both had. I haven't used them a lot, but when I have used them, I've been quite pleasantly surprised with the images they've produced. So if you have got any old lenses hanging about, don't discard them. Get an adapter and check them on your camera, wherever that camera is, and see what they can produce. Yes, they're manual focus, but again, that's not a huge issue. The focus peaking system on the Fuji X-T cameras is fantastic, so that's a real aid to focusing. Anyway, those are the lenses I've been using on my Fuji X-T cameras. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below if you use something different or the same or whatever, or if you've got any lens recommendations for me, and particularly if you've got a recommendation for a 39 to 77 step-up ring. That'd be very helpful if you can find one of those for me. I'd be most grateful. Yeah, anyway, I'm glad to be back. More videos to come, hopefully one on filters next week. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.